and welcome. You're watching a special broadcast here on DD India, and with me is a very special guest, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and Minister for Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Affairs of Luxembourg, Xavier Bettel. Minister, welcome.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Great to have you. And just so our viewers know, he is also a former Prime Minister. In fact, at 40, he was among the youngest prime ministers in the world at the time. He is also a former mayor of Luxembourg City. Minister Bettel, we are meeting at a time when the world is confronted by multiple crises: the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the Gaza conflict, tensions in the Indo-Pacific. I'd like to hear your views on all of that in just a bit. But if I may start by asking you, Minister, about India-Luxembourg and EU-India ties to begin with. The EU Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, recently visited India at the head of a big delegation. A potential free trade agreement is on the cards. How would you describe Luxembourg's ties with India bilaterally and also within the framework of the EU?
If I look at the last years, it really expanded a lot. But there is still a lot of potential. I think we are 36 or 37. India is a commercial partner of Luxembourg. Services are really on number one, but there is a huge potential to continue. I remember I had a virtual summit because of COVID with Prime Minister Modi at that time, and we deepened the relations in a lot of topics. We worked together on also going from satellites, about space, about steel, etc., and health, and I'm sure there are topics to deepen. So this was now my first visit as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and Prime Minister Modi invited me several times, but I was never able to come. But now I did it, and it's I hope also the launch of a growth of the relation between both.
Minister Bettel, India has had a consistent position when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. India says a solution cannot be found on the battlefield. India says it is for direct peace talks. India also says it is ready to do whatever it can in the interest of peace. Even the US under President Trump is in agreement with India on this. In contrast, the EU, some would say, has adopted a rather belligerent or adamant stand. Why is that so? Does the EU want the war to continue?
And I don't think it's about war, about strength, about arms, about conflicts. I would love to sign 3 years ago a peace agreement for them, with them, but with them, not without them. And I fully agree with Indian positions that we need a ceasefire, that we need the end of the war, but we need an end of the war and a ceasefire with Ukraine and not without Ukraine. It cannot be that now America and Russia will decide how Ukraine will have to be tomorrow. It has to be decided with them. And I'm happy that, and you know, after what happened in the Oval Office, when you see that President Zelensky, and I know the egos of politicians. I was Prime Minister for 10 years, so I know most of the colleagues. To find a head of state who's able to say sorry, or I can't find a lot, because he said that he's going to resign for the security of his country. He did it. He's really showing that it's the interest of Ukraine and not the interest of Zelensky. And that's not very common for politicians. So I think to support them is the fact that it's not the strongest who will win. And I just want to remind you that without the Americans, the Brits and the Canadians and the Russians at that time, they liberated Europe from the Second World War. So even if you are not neighbor, it's important when you see that a country is in danger, to help him, because today it's Ukraine. If we don't react, what's going to happen tomorrow?
What concessions would you like Russia to make going forward?
I think the first thing for Russia to accept is that we have international law, and but the deal at the end, it's not on me to decide. And I wouldn't love that it's the deal of Mr. Modi, the deal of Mr. Trump, it's the deal of Mr. Bettel, it's the deal of Emmanuel Macron. It's the deal of the Ukrainians.
Sure.
They have to be on the table. They have to be able to sit there and to say, that's acceptable for us. If we all say the conditions, preconditions, then it will never fly.
And just if I may ask you again, can the world expect EU and Russia rapprochement? I mean, is it possible? Can the EU and Russia ever be friends?
A lot has been broken, and I know what I'm speaking about. My grandmother is Russian, and my grandfather left Russia in 1970. And for me, it's so sad because I have my Russian roots, and we had strong relations, Europe, and I'm really sad about the situations because we share the same continent. And I had talks at the beginning with President Zelensky and President Putin on the phone, regular basis. And then I gave
after
up.
the conflict broke out.
Yes, after the conflict. But after Bucha, I stopped to call because I realized that there was no will also from Russian side to have peace. But for me, it was important to try. I didn't manage, but at least to try. But no deal without Ukraine.
Right. And talking about Ukraine, Minister Bettel, President Zelensky, for one, talks about security guarantees for Ukraine going forward. What about those guarantees going forward in the talks that are taking place?
So for the moment, the fact is, if there is ceasefire, there is this idea of having troops on the ground. But after a peace agreement, that's the moment what I would really suggest to support, also to have these guarantees. And afterwards, we know that NATO will be very difficult. And I just want to remind you.
So Ukraine in NATO is out of the question.
Before Trump, who was president? Biden. Did during 4 years Ukraine join NATO? No. So it hasn't happened the last 4 years. Why now the Americans didn't push for it neither? So but they need guarantees because if there is a permanent danger, once they will come closer. Once they will come closer, it's a part of a progress. But now to say they have to be member now in this package, I think this won't fly. I think so. So they need at least the guarantees from all the others that without being member of the NATO, they have at least the support from the countries saying that we do everything to keep the security guarantees that you need, like you would be a member of NATO without being member of NATO.
Fair enough. And talking about the US, do you stand by your comment, your recent comment, that the US has become, quote unquote, an unreliable partner?
It's the fact that it's unpredictable. It's unpredictable. There was support for defense for Ukraine, no support for defense, support for defense. So it's just the fact that knowing President Trump during the 4 years when I was a prime minister too, it's the fact that it's give and take. It's not just take. And so it is important to know there is a strategy that he wants to have everything good for America, but that doesn't mean that it has to be bad for the others. What is important is to find win-win situations for American economy and also for European or for the partners' economy. So it's just the fact that it's unpredictable. We need to do everything to keep a relation. The biggest error would say that we don't want to work anymore with America. Some of the European countries may want, but I don't want. I think it's important to see where we can work together with the Americans. They were partners, they are partners, and they will stay partners.
And how do you look at the tariffs imposed by President Trump on the EU, for instance? Is a tariff war a real and present danger?
It's the first thing is that the international trade is really in danger because at the end of the day, what is the answer of tariffs? Tariffs, and who will pay? Because if everything you import, and there are a lot of things you import, you have special tariffs. At the end of the day, it's the consumer, it's Donald Trump's elector, voters, who will have to pay in inflation. And so I think at the end of the day, I understand that you want to protect, you want to have a strong economy, you want to consume local, national from your continent. But on the other hand, we should know that international trade is important. And at the end of the day, if tariffs answer will be tariffs, we will have a tariff war where there will be just raised. And then he said, okay, so if you do on steel, we will do it on the champagne, so we will do it on whiskey, as it was. And I think it's not in interest also at the end of the day of the American economy. America first doesn't mean America alone. And the answer shouldn't be Europe alone. The thing is we should see how we can work together, how we can come around the table. and to have pragmatic solutions. But the fact is, Donald Trump is a businessman and he wants good business for his country. But it cannot be just at the cost of the others.
True. And Mr. Bettel, if, as you say, Ukraine in NATO is not on the table, cannot be on the table.
No, it will be once. Believe me, it will be once. The future is in the NATO. But
So
the fact is, for the moment,
Ukraine will become a member of NATO.
if they want, but if the countries agrees too, because you know that we need an unanimous decision. But I won't be the one who says that the future is not
But
in
Russia
NATO.
says that will be a deal breaker.
Okay, but let's start to have peace.
Mhm.
For the moment, there is no deal and no peace.
Right.
So the first thing is to have peace, and then you
Sure.
speak about the deal.
And talking about NATO, Minister, does NATO have a future without a robust EU commitment in terms of political and financial capital? You think NATO is obsolete, redundant?
No, I think it's not redundant, but I understand that on the other hand, for the Americans, it's important that we all pay a fair burden. I have to admit, I have a very small army. I have 800 or 900 soldiers in Luxembourg, so it's difficult to invest and to explain to people that we are not able to build this, and this, because we need to invest in defense where we even are not able to use them because we don't have the capacities to use them. So we are growing, we are really investing a lot of money now in defense because it's a common project. And
Right.
common projects, if you want to be part of it, you need also to pay the fair burden. And we are doing that for the moment. But it's for me, it's not obsolete. But on the other hand, it is important also to have a European strategy.
Mhm.
And if I look, for example, Europe was created at the beginning with steel and coals because we needed to have a union, how
Right.
we can be able to have a strong market together. If I look, and that it was a success. If I look Airbus now, Airbus is a European company. It's French, it's Spanish, it's with Germany and with the UK. So few countries coming together. Maybe we need also in Europe of security, of defense, where we are able also to have an industry in Europe.
Mhm.
That's one of the topic I think which could be useful for the
And
future.
that gives me a perfect segue to my next question to you, Minister. We're keeping hearing about an EU army. Is that an idea whose time has come? An EU-wide army of its own?
The fact is we need a Europe defense. Army is different. Army
Okay.
would be, we have common, for example, Luxembourg has common with Belgians, troops, and we have common battalions. And we do a lot of exercises together. We have common battalions in NATO
Mhm.
for the moment. So we have already these NATO common groups. What I think is important is to have a common defense.
Fair enough. And one last question on Russia before we move on to other topics, Minister. Sanctions on Russia, good or bad?
As long as there is no progress, I don't know why we should take them away. The sanctions are effective, and we see the results of the Russian economy. But it's, believe me, I would have loved 3 years ago that we would have peace. I insist on that. I'm really, and I'm Luxembourg. I'm not Ukrainian. Imagine you are Ukrainian and you have your neighbor, even families, were Russian Ukrainians. It's really sad.
Indeed. Minister, let me now draw your attention to developments in the Middle East, or West Asia as we call it, in this part of the world. You've traveled to West Asia 4 times since 7th of October 2023. You've met Israeli and Palestinian leaders most recently in the second week of March. What would you like to see Israel do in the interest of peace?
So, in the interest of, for Israel, it's more security than peace. They want security. But they will have security once Gaza and Palestine will be in peace. As long as there is no peace, as long as there is a conflict, as long as there are violent settlers, there will be non-security. So the first thing is to have the ceasefire. I know what happened. It's terrible the last hours again. It's in the hand of Israel to make it more unstable. That is the fragile stability for the moment. So
the onus on Israel to enforce or ensure that
we needed at the end of the day
ceasefire?
we needed a two-state solution. We needed a two-state solution. We needed a Palestine state. We need a Palestine state where Palestinians are able to live, and not Palestine without Palestinians, but Palestine with Palestinians, and where they are able to grow up in peace. And as long as for some Palestinian Hamas is the only solution, we won't have peace. We need to give an opportunity and a future also to the young generation. That's where we have to work with.
Without the Hamas, of course, going forward.
Hamas out. Hamas is a terrorist organization. So I don't deal with them. But we need to show to people that Hamas is not the solution.
Right.
But we can just do it if there is peace and there is a future also for the people living there. As long as they logistic bombs. How do you want to say to young Palestinians that Israel is okay when he buried his father the day before? But how do you want to say to young Israeli that Palestinians are okay when his sister or brother is still a hostage from the Hamas? So the hate is there. So there is long progress because hate is the most difficult thing to fight.
Are you hopeful that the Hamas would agree to the next stage of negotiations, the second stage?
It's in their interest. But if it shows, they are so disgusting, to put the hostages or people close to their house to be sure that if there is an attack on them, that some hostages will be killed. This shows how disgusting these people are.
And staying in the region, Minister, how do you see the recent US strikes on Yemen? Is that going to ratchet up tensions further, you think?
I think it's important to keep Yemen also in mind, but not only Yemen. When we see the Sudan and all the regions, there is a lot of instability. And the Houthis in Yemen doesn't help. They are troublemakers, but there are so many conflicts. You started your speech to say about how many conflicts we have, but we have so many more. So many more. If I look at the African continent, when I see the coups in Mali, Burkina and Sahel, in Mali, Niger, when I see the earth is a bit on fire. So I said yesterday to your Prime Minister Modi, I like the Indian pragmatism. Usually when I have discussions with him, he's always pragmatic, and I like that. But we live a bit in a crazy world, and we speak a lot about each other, but not enough to each other.
Indeed. And staying in the region, Minister, are you concerned by the sectarian violence in Syria?
Yes, because everybody thought that when Bashar al-Assad was gone, then inshallah, yuppie, we have a new one. That's a good guy. I just want to remind they are terrorists too. And it's not because a terrorist wears a tie that he's a diplomat. So
Ahmed al-Shara, you view him as a jihadist, as a terrorist?
No, I just said it's not because he wears a tie that he's a diplomat.
Right.
He needs to prove who he is. It's too quick now, it's too soon to be able to say if he's a good guy or bad guy. But I don't want to go all in like in poker to say I trust them blind. We need to see step by step how the efforts are done in the right direction. But I just want to remind that they were terrorists in their not that long past.
Are you thereby implying that the European Union should not rush into giving legitimacy to
We should
Ahmed
do it
al-Shara?
step by step. I think now what was important is to have inquiries about what happened also in Syria, to see exactly these atrocities who happened the last days and weeks. And I just want to say that I'm not decided to go all in to say that they are just good guys. They have to prove it.
Indeed. Minister, we've spoken about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. We also touched upon the situation in the Middle East. Let me now turn your attention to the Indo-Pacific. How do you look at the situation developing across the Taiwan Strait? Are there any lessons you think for Taiwan from Ukraine's experience?
If China wanted to attack Taiwan the last 3 years, they could have done it. They haven't done it.
So does that mean they will not try?
No, I don't put me words in my mouth. I don't use. The fact is, they could have had the opportunity by saying everybody is taking care of Ukraine. So what's happening in Taiwan, nobody will care. We are for one China policy. So there is one China. And I think that China should not forget that they are one of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. We have 5. We have enough troubles with some of the 5s. So China can be pragmatic. For Ukraine, they voted in favor of some European amendments. So I don't want to push China in Russian arms. But we need to...
But you pushed Russia into Chinese arms in the last 3 odd years.
No, believe me, China was happy if anyone was speaking to them. They were a bit isolated. I had phone calls where I told them that at the beginning the support was Syria, was Iran, it was North Korea. I just want to remind this was not the best buddies club, if I look at it. And they isolated themselves, and it's a pity because, believe me, Russia is a big country, it's an important country, and I hope that they will find the way on the right track again, because it's sad. And with China, also they have to know that to be member of the Security Council, it's not honor, it's not a privilege, it's a responsibility.
Minister, you spoke about the EU position on China, the One China policy, but the most recent G7 statement omits any mention of the so-called One China policy. So do we discern a change or a shift in the common transatlantic position on
You're speaking about the G7. It's a pity Luxembourg is not member of the G7, so I
Fair
cannot.
enough.
I was not there to discuss about the tax, but I just can tell you for us that we have a One China policy, and we know that China is also a rival, and but we should not push them away, but we should be pragmatic, because we know that we have some relations where it's more complicated.
But if I understood you correctly, Minister, are you suggesting that the China-Russia cooperation is not good for the world?
No, I just said that if we push China in Russian arms, if we say to them, Americans, Europeans, Indians, we don't want to work with China, they will have to find partners.
Sure.
And so I prefer to see where we can.
I know.
Where we can. I didn't, but it's not blind, not being blind and blunt. So it's to see how on pragmatism we can find common solutions.
Fair enough. And talking about the multilateral efforts going around the world, Minister, is multilateralism as we know it dead?
It's difficult. When I see all the agencies, you know, the UN, when I see this International Criminal Court, when I see the WHO, it's more difficult for them to work today than it was a few months ago.
So where does
But I believe in multilateral. You know, my country was a poor country. In the 19th century, a lot of people left my country because we had no food. And it's through multilateralism that we got the positions that we have today. So I will always believe in multilateralism. Egoism and wars have never been a solution. Common problems need common solutions.
And in that context, do you favor or do you welcome efforts to expand the UN Security Council's permanent membership to include countries such as India?
I think, you know, we have two possibilities. We have this P5, we can make it bigger. Africa is not represented at all. Africa is not there. So we could have two things. The first thing is about the functioning. So I don't want to have a bigger Security Council if there is still a veto right. Because now with 5 already, it's one chance on 5 that one.
So you
is
don't want the
vetoing.
new members to have
No.
veto rights?
I can have new members, but then that all this veto system is changing. So that means that if one permanent member is vetoing, the General Assembly could, with a 2/3 majority, overrule it.
Right.
Then I agree. But to say that we have 5 for the moment, we go 10 or 15 tomorrow with 15 veto rights, it would be impossible to take decisions.
Fair enough. In conclusion, I'm approaching the end of my time, Minister. So a couple of questions. Greenland is in the news. Is it entirely up to Greenland people themselves, or does the EU have a say in their future?
I think it's on the people themselves, the first, to know what they want, and then on Denmark, but it's on the people from Greenland to decide themselves.
And finally, Minister, you're a lawyer, you are a full-time politician, you also hosted a TV talk show. What do you love doing the most? Is it law, politics, or media?
I'm lucky that I loved everything I did. I was a mayor of a capital, I was a deputy mayor of a capital, I was a prime minister for 10 years, I'm now minister of foreign affairs, I was a lawyer, I did a lot of things, and I was lucky that every job I had, I loved. There is nothing I regret. Now I'm very much not at home as Minister of Foreign Affairs, but I said to my partner, if you miss me, tell me something. He didn't say anything yet, so I love how we are able to be as a partner, to have a common life, and to build on that, because, you know, after politics, it is important also to have this at home, to know that you have someone you can trust.
Absolutely. On that, Minister Bettel, thank you so much for joining us and
Thank
sharing
you.
your thoughts with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Right. And it's a wrap on this special broadcast. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.